So one of the most fun things about this whole process is basically I've moved house a lot in my life, and every time I would shed more and more books because they're so annoying to carry from place to place, and then I would buy more and then I have to shed them next time. So it's been pretty cool going through old books and seeing which ones I decided to keep. And these are some of my favorite kids' books. I don't really have a lot of kids' books, but these two I definitely decided were worth keeping. I'll start with this one, which when I was a kid, I hated dust jackets. I hated them. I took dust jackets off of all of my books. I also thought it made them look, fancier. But it's called Stories for Free Children. It's a weird little collection of stories because they're stories from Ms. Magazine from back in the day, and they've got all of the original story publication dates. And then this book specifically, it was published in 1982, and I was published in 1984. So I've had it for most of my life, I reckon. There are a lot of stories, as you can see, but I just picked my favorite three, and I made bookmarks so I wouldn't get lost. This might be my favorite one out of the whole thing, and that's why I'm recording in the kitchen, because I really want to be able to show the pictures. So I hope people can see. I can't even really see where my camera is, but we'll go for it. We'll go for it. Bookmark one. I think about the story quite a lot, actually. The Magic Place by Helen Paramore Twigg. In the middle of a large city, towering high on all sides with walls and windows, lined under feet with concrete and cement, bound on every front with signs that told you where to go and lights that told you when to go, there lived a small girl, a smaller boy, and an even smaller dog on the 32nd floor of one of the tallest buildings. Twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon, they put a leash on the small dog, and the three of them rode the elevator down 32 stories to the street, where they walked 5 blocks up and 5 blocks back on the cement sidewalk. They watched the traffic on the busy concrete street, and they read all the signs along the way. "Curb your dog," said one. So they did. "Do not litter," said another. So they didn't. "Cross on walk only," said another, and they crossed on the exact center of the crosswalk. "Do not loiter," said one at the hotel, so they hurried by quickly. "No spitting," said one at the subway entrance, and they passed it by with their lips squeezed together in 2 straight lines. "No parking," said one near the corner, and they relaxed a little because, of course, they had nothing to park. When they were 5 blocks from their own tall building, they would turn and go back the way they had come, doing and not doing everything again all the way home. One afternoon, as they reached the place to turn and go back, the small girl, whose name was Lavernia, said to the smaller boy, whose name was Roosevelt, "Let's go a few more blocks." "Oh, we shouldn't," he replied. "But we should," she answered. "Look there." She was pointing to a sign which said, "This way." The boy looked at it with distrust. "I never saw that there before." The small dog ran over to the signpost and smelled it very carefully. Then she wagged her tail all the way up to her ears and barked excitedly. "See," said Lavernia, "even Poppy wants to go. And dogs have a way of knowing things," she added wisely. At that, the boy agreed to go, and the 3 started off going, "This way." It really wasn't any different from the cement sidewalks of the blocks they had already walked along. Signs saying, "Slow, children," made them slow down. The next one said, "Resume safe speed," so they walked faster. There were several signs bunched together at the corner with nothing but numbers on them. 101, 78, 63, 27A, 207. These the children ignored because they weren't very good at arithmetic, and they didn't know whether to add or subtract. Just beyond the numbers, there was a sign which said, "One way," so they went that way, until they came to one which said, "Stop." "Gosh," said Roosevelt, "what do we do now?" He was uneasy about being so far from the places he knew. "Well," replied Lavernia, "we have to look for another sign." They both looked up and down and right and left, but they could see no more signs, until Poppy began to bark and wag her tail. She was under a sign which said, "Proceed with caution." So Roosevelt, Lavernia, and Poppy tiptoed cautiously for a whole city block. They tiptoed right up to a very fancy ironwork gate which blocked their way. They could go no further. They stood and looked over it carefully. The iron was shaped and fashioned into roses and leaves and twining vines. On one side, there was a little sign which said, "Ring bell, walk in," and under it was a doorbell. Roosevelt was afraid, but Lavernia rang the bell, and together they pushed against the iron gate until it swung open, creaking and groaning dreadfully. They stepped through the opening very cautiously and stopped just inside. They were standing on a pebble path which led from the gate and disappeared behind a tree. All around the path was green, green grass, bright flowers, bushes, and tall, leafy trees. Sunlight shone down and made bright yellow splotches on the grass. The children stood very still on the pebble path and looked around them with big eyes. Finally, Roosevelt pulled her arm and said, almost whispering, "I never saw any place like this place." "Me neither," said Lavernia. "It doesn't sound like any place I ever heard either." "And smells," added Roosevelt. "It even smells different." They stood very close together, with Poppy sitting very still at their feet, sniffing and trembling. They looked and listened and smelled. They saw the green of the gold of the plants of the sunlight and the bright colours of many flowers. They heard the buzzing of bees and the songs of birds and the crunchy pebbles beneath their feet. They smelled the earth, the fragrance of flowers and the green grass. They didn't know what to do or what to think. "Lavernia," said Roosevelt, "there's no cement, no sidewalk." "Yeah," she answered, "and no tall walls of buildings either." The boy moved even closer and held her hand. He was scared. "What are we going to do?" "Don't be scared," she replied. "We'll just look for some signs. Look there, Roosevelt, there's one now." Nearby, under a bush, there was a little sign, which Lavernia read. "Podocarpus." "What?" said Roosevelt. "Podocarpus? What's that mean?" "I'm not exactly sure," she replied hesitantly. "Maybe we should find another one instead." So they looked for another while moving down the path a little and peering under the bushes. "Aha!" cried Lavernia. "There's another." And she read, "Sansevieria." "But what does it mean?" wailed Roosevelt. He was getting very worried about everything. 2 tears slipped out of his eyes and slid down his cheeks. Lavernia saw the tears and knew she had better give him a straight answer before he really started to cry. She said, very matter-of-factly, "It means, take your shoes off." So they both did that, and then, shoes in hand, they walked on the cool green grass, digging their toes into the damp earth. Poppy trotted along with them, her ears cocked and her tail up, sniffing and listening to everything. Soon they spotted another sign by a curve in the path. Lavernia read, "Bromelia," and said surely, "We go this way now." She seemed to be so sure of herself that no one, especially a smaller boy, would have questioned her authority. "Okay," he agreed, "but what does it mean?" "It means a place to eat lunch," she answered without a moment's hesitation. She had begun to believe that she actually understood the signs. "We don't have any lunch," said Roosevelt sadly. No, but we will have when we get to Bromelia's. Just wait and see. How do you know? Asked Roosevelt. I bet you're just making stuff up to tell me so I won't cry. Besides, I'm really hungry. I've got it all figured out, said Lavernia. Then she lowered her voice to a mysterious whisper and intoned slowly, We are in a magic place, and all the signs are in magic language. Her eyes were so wide and excited, and her voice sounded so strange that Roosevelt believed every word she said. But he had to ask, How come you can read magic language and I can't? Because I'm part of the magic, she answered with cool logic. Now let's go eat lunch. They ran down the path, past several flowering bushes and many strange-leafed plants, and arrived breathless in front of a lovely old gnarled tree covered with golden apples. They stared in disbelief and wonder until Lavernia reached up and picked one for each of them. They threw themselves, tummies down, on the grass and ate the apples hungrily. You were right all the time, said Roosevelt, and I thought you were just joking me. Gosh, you were even right about lunch. A real magic place for sure. Of course, she replied. Poppy began tugging at her leash, so the children got up and followed her down the path until they saw a sign which said, Edelweiss. That means goodbye, said Lavernia, and sure enough, just beyond were the fancy ironwork gates where they had come in. They sat down and put their shoes on, and together they pulled at the gates until they swung open. They went out, closing the gate carefully behind them, and they walked towards home, down the cement sidewalk between the tall buildings. When they reached the corner, they turned to look back. They saw the ironwork gates with the roses and leaves and the bell, and then Lavernia saw something else. Over the gates was another sign, all worked in iron roses. She read, Botanical Gardens. Does that mean magic place? Asked Roosevelt. Of course, she answered. And so it was. Yes, it's always one of my favorite places to be. There's a really good one here. And it's good for long, languid picnics and pretending you are like romantic poets. Punting on the Thames. There's also, it says, Helen Paramore Twigg is a professor of interdisciplinary humanities at Valencia Community College in Orlando, Florida. Well, she's probably not anymore. I mean, I don't know how old she is. But that's always been one of my favorites. And now moving on to the next one. I don't know why I love this so much, but I do. It is The Girl with the Incredible Feeling. Text and illustrations by Elizabeth Swados. A girl had an incredible feeling. The feeling had no name, but it was very faithful, and the girl treated it very well. The feeling made the girl act in incredible ways. It made her dance and sing wonderful songs. It made her laugh at things others fought over. The feeling made nature enormous and wonderful. She saw and heard incredible things. For instance, 1. Men with crates for beards. 2. Beatnik basset hounds. 3. One friend who always talks and the other who always listens. 4. Birds with sunglass eyes. 5. Bank teller penguins. 6. Baby adults. 7. A most unusual shoe. And 8. A very curious hat. Maybe this is 8. One day a man came out of the shadows and complimented the girl on her feeling. He said there was great use for it all around the world. Thus began a series of unfortunate events. The feeling had to be dressed up and straightened out. Scholars, scientists, and politicians tried to explain it and give it a name. People tried to steal the feeling and call it their own. As the girl became more popular, the feeling grew weak, faded from neglect, and finally disappeared. At first, the girl didn't notice it was gone, but soon she began to feel empty inside. She had horrible dreams. She could see right through herself. She couldn't feel anything. Everyone and everything looked and acted the same. The girl trusted no one. She knew that she had to find her feeling. The shadow man shouted after her, "Come back." He tempted her with gifts. He told jokes to make her laugh and forget. She refused to listen and walked away. Generous young people offered her their feelings. She refused politely and kept walking. She kept walking and walking. Wise men offered amazing facts, but she ignored them and kept walking. She kept walking and walking until she was right back where she started. And then, after a very long time, beautiful smells, amazing sights and sounds, more incredible than before. And, although she was ashamed, she didn't have to apologize or explain. The feeling was hers again. I absolutely am in love with this drawing over here. Elizabeth Swados is an author, composer, and theatre director whose works have appeared on and off Broadway and worldwide. Among them, Nightclub Cantata, Runaways, Dispatches, The Haggadah, and Lullaby and Goodnight. She has published 3 children's books: The Girl with the Incredible Feeling, Sky Dance and Lullaby with Faith Hubley. Her first novel, Lear and Lazar, was published in 1982. I've never heard about any of those, but I really always have liked this story. The last one is a bit peculiar. It's a real person, not a story. So I'll read all of this in the beginning. By Opal Whiteley, edited by Jane Bolton. The story of Opal. Her parents died before she was 5. She was given to an Oregon couple whose own child had died, and they named her Opal Whiteley. Because her foster father was a lumberman, Opal spent her childhood in 19 different lumber camps, where she started writing this diary in the early 1900s. She was then about 5 or 6. When Opal was 12, a foster sister discovered the diary in its hiding place and tore the pages into thousands of pieces. Opal stored the pitiful scraps in a secret box. Desperately poor at the age of 20, she tried to sell a nature book she had written to Ellen Sedgwick, the editor of Atlantic Monthly Press. There was little in the book to tempt a publisher, but the girl herself, something very young and eager and fluttering, like a bird in a thicket, had special appeal. After hearing bits of her life story, Sedgwick asked if she had kept a diary of her interesting life. Opal burst into wordless tears. Then, painfully, over 9 months, she pieced together the shredded pages. In 1920, the diary was published as The Story of Opal in a limited edition of 650 copies. Though the book is long out of print, Opal's story will never be outdated as long as we are touched by a lost and wandering child. Except for a few words that are charmingly misspelled, most of the spelling has been corrected. Since the words seemed like poetry, this is the form that I gave them for this condensation, but the words are hers. My mother and father are gone. The man did say they went to heaven and do live with God, but it is lonesome without them. The mamma where I live says I am a nuisance. I think it is something grown-ups don't like to have around. She sends me out to bring wood in. Some days there is cream to be shaked into butter. Some days I sweep the floor. The mamma likes to have her house nice and clean. Under the steps lives a toad. I call him Virgil. Under the house live some mice. They have such beautiful eyes. I give them bread to eat. I like this house we do live in, being at the edge of the near woods, all the way from the other logging camp in the beautiful mountains. We came in a wagon. 2 horses were in front of us. They walked in front of us all the way. When first we were come, we did live with some people in the ranch house that wasn't builded yet. After that, we lived in a tent. Often when it did rain, many raindrops came right through the tent. They did fall in patters on the stove and on the floor and on the table too. They did make quilts on the quilts on the beds some damp, but soon they got dried, hanging around the stove. I found the near woods first day I did go explores. So many little people do live in them. I do have conversations with them. One way the road does go to a house of the girl who has no seeing. When it gets to her house, it does make a bend, and it does go its way to the blue hills. I tell her about the trees talking. I tell her cloud ships are sailing over the hills in a hurry. Sometimes I read the books that Angel Mother and Angel Father did write in. They tell me about all the great men. Now I know what to name my favorite mouse. He is Felix Mendelssohn. Today, near eventime, I did lead the girl who has no seeing a little way into the forest, where it was darkness and shadows were. I led her toward a shadow that was coming our way. It did touch her cheeks with its velvety fingers, and now she does too have likings for shadows, and her fear that was is gone. Today is taking egg day. I put my blue bonnet on and take eggs to the folks all around. I put Felix Mendelssohn in my pocket. He does like to go for walks, and sometimes he sleeps in my sleeve. When he has wake-ups, we try to find cheese. He has likes for cheese. New folks live by the mill. Dear love, her husband does call her. They are so happy, but they've been married 7 whole months and haven't got a baby yet. I pray prayers for angels to bring them one real soon. When I told her, she smiled glad smiles and kissed me, 2 on the cheeks and 1 on the nose. Then I did have joy feels all over, and Felix Mendelssohn poked his nose out of my sleeve. She gave him a little pat, and I knew dear love was my friend. I decided to take the mother pig for a walk. I went to the woodshed. I got a piece of clothesline rope. While I was making a halter for the mother pig, I took my Sunday best hair ribbon and put the bow just over her ears. That gave her the proper look. When the mamma saw us go walking by, she took the bow from off of the pig. She put that bow in the trunk. Me, she put under the bed. By and by, some long time it was, she took me from under the bed and did give me a spanking. She did not have time to give me a spanking when she put me under the bed. She left me there until she did have time. After she did it, she sent me to the ranch house to get milk for the baby. I walked slow through the oak grove, looking for caterpillars. I found 9. I sit here on the doorstep, printing this on wrapping paper. The baby is in bed asleep. The mamma and the rest of the folks is gone to the ranch house. She said for me to stay in the doorway to see that nothing comes to carry the baby away. The back part of me feels a little bit sore, but I am happy, listening to the twilight music of God's good world. The calf is Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I think she will be a lovely cow. Her mewings are musical, and there is poetry in her tracks. She makes such dainty ones. When they dry up in the lane, I dig them up and save them. There are lonesome feels in her mewings when her mother is away. I put my arm around her neck. It is such a comfort to have a friend near when lonesome feels do come. Jenny Strong visits the mamma. All her plumpness fills the grey dress that she wears, and every time she nods her head, the pink rosebud on her black bonnet gives itself a nod. The mamma did spank me because I showed her my mouse. She sits by the fire and rocks and crochets. She does make lace a quick way, but I have wonders about her. She does not like mice. When I feel sad inside, I talk things over with my tree. I call him Michael Raphael. When I go off the barn roof, it is a long jump into his arms. I might get my leg or my neck broken, and I'd have to keep still for a long time. So I always say a little prayer and do jump in a careful way. It is such a comfort to nestle up to Michael Raphael. He is a grand tree. He has an understanding soul. Today, the grandpa dug potatoes in the field. I followed along after. I picked them up and piled them in piles. Some of them were very plump, and all the time I was picking up potatoes, I did have conversations with them, too. I did have thinks of all their growing days there in the ground, and all the things they did here. Potatoes are very interesting folks. I think they must see a lot of what is going on in the earth. They have so many eyes. And after, I did count the eyes that every potato did have, and their numbers were in blessings. I have thinks these potatoes growing here did have knowings of star songs. I have kept watch in the field at night, and I've seen the stars look kindness down upon them, and I have walked between the rows of potatoes, and I have watched the star gleams on their leaves. Dear Love gave me a great big piece of cheese. It wasn't a little piece. There's enough in it for 4 breakfasts and 6 dinners. Felix Mendelssohn is very happy. His cheese longings are like my longings for Angel Mother and Angel Father. Tomorrow, I will be taking the calf, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, to the girl who has no seeing. My little friends do like the pat she gives them and the words she does say. She has wants for friends too. I have need of more colour pencils, so I do write the fairies about it. I put the letter in the moss box at the end of the old log. No one knows about the box but one. He is the man who wears grey neckties and is kind to mice. Sometimes he makes a special fairy wish with me. I go and tell him when the fairies leave the pencils. He is so surprised, and he is happy too. Then I can make more prints. Near the trail grow honeysuckles. I nod to them as I go by. They talk in shadows with the little people of the sun, and this I have learned. Grown-ups do not know the language of shadows. Angel Mother and Angel Father did know, and they taught me. I wish they were here now. I do so want them. I have thinks sometimes. Kind God just opens the gates of heaven and lets them come out to be guardian angels for a while. I did not have goings to school today, for this is a wash day, and the mamma did have needs of me at home. There was baby clothes to wash. The mamma does say that it is my work, and I try to do it in the proper way. She does say it ought to be done. It does take a long time, and all the time it is taking, I do have longings to go on exploration trips. When the clothes of the baby were most white, I did bring them again to the wash bench. Then there was the chickens to feed and the stockings to rub. Stockings do have needs of many rubs. That makes them clean. While I did do the rubs, I sang little songs to the grasses that grow about our door. Today I went to dear Love's house. She was knitting socks for her husband. I sat down beside her, right near the blue gingham apron with cross-stitches on it. I counted 30 cross-stitches. Some day I will count them all. I went to the house of the girl who has no seeing, but she was not at home. I did sit on the gatepost to wait waits. It was a long time. A man stopped and asked why I wait. I told him, and he looked off into the hills. Then he did say, "Child, she won't come back." I told him I knew she would come back because she always does. I gave him a sorry smile because he does not know this. I waited some more waits, and then my mouse made cheese squeaks. I will go tomorrow. Early this morning, I went to the house of the girl who has no seeing. 2 men were talking by the fence. One did say, "It is better so." Another man did say, "A pity it was." She couldn't have the sight to see the bushfire ahead. Then, probably the smell of the smoke caused her to worry about the house with the fire coming. Probably she was trying to find it when she walked right into it. And the other man did have asks if she was conscious after. He answered, "Yes." I felt a queerness in my throat, and I couldn't see either more. The men said, they said her clothes did have fire, and her running did make the fire to burn her more. They found her when she died. I go now to write a message on a leaf for the angels to carry her to heaven, and she can see the blooming flowers. I will jump into Michael Raphael's arms and talk it over. One of my tooths is loose and a queer feel. The man who wears grey neckties and is kind to mice says tie a string around it on a doorknob. I did as he said. I started to walk off, then I came back a ways. I decided to wait a little while. I walked off again. Then I took the string off my tooth and thought I'd wait until after dinner. On the way home from school, I stopped to get watercress for the mamma. She does have such fondness for it. Some days are long, some days are short. The days that I have to stay in the house are the most long days of all. There are no rows and rows and rows of books in this house like Angel Mother and Angel Father had. There is only 3 books here. One is a cookbook, and one is a doctor book, and one is an almanac. They are all on the top of the cupboard, most against the top of the house. When the mowers cut down the grain, they also do cut down the cornflowers that do grow in the fields. I follow along after and do pick them up. Of some I make a garland to put around Shakespeare's neck. Then I do talk to him about the one he is named for. He is such a beautiful grey horse, and his ways are ways of gentleness. Too, he does have likings for the likings I have, for the hills that are beyond the fields. Some day I will write about the big tree that I love. Today I watch and did hear its moans as the saw went through it. There was a queer feel in my throat, and I couldn't stand up. When the saw did stop, there was a stillness. There was a queer, sad sound. The big tree did quiver. It did sway. It crashed to the earth. Oh, Michael Raphael. Morning work is done. There is enough box in the wood box for today and tomorrow, and many kindlings are on the floor. Now I can make prints. I'm sitting on a log for the last time in my cathedral. Tomorrow we will move to a mill town. Elizabeth Barrett Browning has been sold, with her mother, the gentle Jersey. The man who wears grey neckties and is kind to mice is going to take care of all of my mouse friends in his bunkhouse. Dear Love and her husband say Felix Mendelssohn can live under their front step. They will also take care of my garden. I've walked past the house of the girl who has no seeing, and I prayed prayers. I will leave letters for the fairies in the moss box. Dear Love told me a secret only her husband knows, and now I know. They are going to have a baby in 5 months. The angels let them know ahead. I have thinks that it is a long time to wait waits. Prayers for babies must always get answered. And then this picture says, Opal Whiteley spent 9 months piecing together shreds of her childhood diary. And here it says, the diary page was written on a paper bag, this diary page. It says, today the folks are gone away from the house we do live in. They are gone a little way away to the ranch house. And then Jane Bolton calls herself a buried poet and novelist. She's now living happily in Palo Alto, California, working on a film script of Opal and a novel to be titled Journey Within a Journey. I wonder if that ever came about. I should Google it. And I also should look her up because that's actually pretty cool. I didn't read the whole thing before I read it. I picked it because I remember loving it because I was also a mouse-having, tree-loving nerd girl. So these are the 3 of the picture from here. But there's also this most wonderful, beautiful, marvelous book, which is very short and quick and has to be included because it's gorgeous. And I will never, ever, ever, ever let go of it. It will come with me to every house until I'm dead, and then it will go to a thrift store probably, and some other person will fall in love with it. But yes, if you're afraid of the dark, remember the night rainbow. It's old and raggedy. If tomorrow morning the sky falls, Have clouds for breakfast. If night falls, use stars for street lights. If the moon gets stuck in a tree, cover the hole in the sky with a strawberry. If you have butterflies in your stomach, ask them into your heart. If your heart catches in your throat, ask a bird how she sings. If the birds forget their songs, listen to a pebble instead. If you lose a memory, embroider a new one to take its place. If you lose the key, throw away the house. If the clock stops, use your own hands to tell time. If the light goes out, wear it around your neck and go dancing. If the bus doesn't come, catch a fast cloud. If it's the last dance, dance backwards. If you find your socks don't match, dear, stand in a flower bed. That's good advice. If your shoes don't fit, give them to the fish in the pond. If your horse needs shoes, let him use his wings. If the sun never shines again, hold fireflies in your hands to keep warm. If you're afraid of the dark, remember the night rainbow. If there is no happy ending, make one out of cookie dough. That was really nice. For me, I mean. I don't know how anyone else felt about it, but yeah, it was really great to revisit those again. I kind of have to go Google more about OPAL now. Those were beautiful little semi-poems. I hope if your intention was to fall asleep, that I didn't make any startling noises, and that you are now sleeping very soundly.